Now, all eyes for the African National Congress is on Nasrec, where the ANC Youth League Elective Conference is expected to take place. There have been delays upon delays as they struggle to get all the paperwork sorted over the last 2 days or so, and official proceedings were expected to arrive today. We know some of the big guns have already arrived, but proceedings are yet to get underway, and we will be getting an update from Pulele Jones, who's been monitoring developments there. But let's start our conversation here in the studio with our in-studio analyst, Rebone Tau, who joins us in the studio. Rebone, thank you so much for your time. A lot of focus on this elective conference in more ways than one. And just to set the scene for people who are watching us this morning, you served on the first ANC Youth League National Task Team way back after, and this is aging us now, way back after Julius Malema's leadership was disbanded. And it seems like a lifetime ago. But in the world of politics, it's also just yesterday.
Absolutely.
Just as a scene set for where we find ourselves with the ANC Youth League right now, with time ticking by ahead of the big national polls next year, what do you make of the time and the space that the ANC Youth League has navigated since the time that you were part of that task team in a very different time in the ANC Youth League?
Good morning, and good morning to the viewers at home. I mean, this marks a decade, since the disbandment of the Youth League in 2013, and we were appointed in 2013 April. And it's sad to see the status of the Youth League that it is in today, that after 10 years, there's no improvement. Actually, it's getting weaker. And I think it's because of the interference of some of the ANC leaders, don't wanting the Youth League to be an autonomous organization, wanting to dictate who must lead the Youth League. Because, I was reflecting yesterday on some of the events that took place on Thursday evening, people like Xola being removed as the convener, and some of the NTT members that I spoke to, telling me how they were intimidated by the Secretary General in that meeting, and being told that if they don't toe the line, they will receive letters that they will have to explain themselves why they shouldn't go to the DC. And I then went back to our era, in the Youth League, because there were two congresses that I was part of that I could recall immediately. It was this Kukuni Congress, whereby there were two parallel congresses that sat in one day, and I remember the following day, Vuyo Mhlakazi and I, went to Litula House, to engage with the Secretary General, Gwede Mantashe, who then took us to the late DSG, Jesse Duarte, and when we got there, the ANC didn't take sides, but the ANC decided to be a mother to us as the Youth League, and said, what, because both NTT members from both factions, you could say, are conflicted in this, so we're going to remove you from Skukun. And I remember after that, Eastern Cape was sitting, because it was on the eve of the National Congress of the Youth League, which was then turned to a consultative. And I remember I was already deployed to Eastern Cape, but I went because the contestation was so high, because my way to Khune was standing as Secretary General under the slate of Makasela Mzobe. And that was a congress that was called a Festival of Ideas, and two leaders in Eastern Cape emerged from that process, which they call the inside and the outside leadership, And you had an NTT member by Nokuthula Mbesa who went to preside after the other grouping left. But the ANC did not remove her from the task team. The ANC did not threaten her. And so I was a bit shocked of the behavior today of the leadership that is leading the ANC, that it's becoming so intolerant and impatient with the Youth League.
And here we stand, also just a few days before the elective conference, there was contestation in the Eastern Cape yet again, very much a place where you can test the temperature of the organization still at this time, even though so much has changed. Thank you so much for laying the foundation there for where we find ourselves now. We're going to connect with my colleague Pulele Jones. We've been bringing you, as you were speaking, we're bringing live pictures of what looks like members of the ANC Youth League making their way into the venue. Pule, what do you have for us?
Yeah. Definitely. Good morning, Marcel. As you can see, we are at now the Nasrec Center where the delegates will be entering. Currently now they're being, going through security measures to ensure that they don't have any kind of lethal or dangerous weapons. And from there onwards, conference will then open. We're expecting the Secretary General of the organization, Mr. Fikile Mbalula, to chat to us to chat to the delegates and, of course, open the conference and, of course, present that organizational report as well. It'll be interesting to see how it will go underway, particularly because the conference has incurred so many challenges as well in relation to the registration process being delayed, amongst other issues. But, of course, we're seeing delegates arriving here from various provinces as well.
And we know we had lots of delays yesterday, Pule, more delays this morning, and we chatted about it earlier, about these kinds of delays at the elective conference. It's not the first time we're seeing it, but the question of how long it will take, we could say how long is a piece of string? What is the atmosphere like? Is there impatience from the delegates, or are they kind of all just taking this in their stride?
Well, look, we saw that some of the delegates got off to a very slow start. In fact, some of them were having breakfast, others had to now register because they were late and they were delayed. So those are the kind of challenges that contributed to the conference actually getting off to a slow start as well. But it seems as though they're coming in, they're getting into the main entrance here. They will be beginning with the business of the day. And we had spoken to the national organizer earlier on. I just want you to take a listen to what he had to say in terms of the road to this elective conference.
We are done with registration for the National Congress. We are now cleaning up the credentials report with the Secretariat and the Steering Committee and the Credentials Committee, which we will then table to the National Congress for consideration. Because we had to be thorough with our process. We had to be thorough with our process, having to ensure that we register as much delegates as possible, and we register the correct delegates. We have to be thorough, much thorough, go through all the required checklists before we could register delegates, so that our process is above reproach. And we can indeed confirm that Congress is starting now. As you would see that most of the people that you would have seen from the scenes of yesterday around this vicinity, there's no more the sort of activity that was here, because most of the people would have registered. I can surely say well above 85% of the delegates would have registered. But we will table the accurate numbers at plenary because the team, I'm still having to go back with the team to really reconcile the numbers and present to plenary. But indeed, Congress is ready from the look of things, and that obviously will be tabled at National Congress. It is for delegates to deal with that, but we're satisfied with the process.
Satisfied with the process, Pule, is what we've heard there, and yet we're still waiting for that process to start. Back over to you.
Yeah, definitely. We're still waiting for that process to start. I've just bumped into some delegates here, of course, who are going to chat to us this morning. Katlego, thank you very much for joining us. Just in regards to the preparations and the state of readiness, what are some of the challenges you incurred as well as a delegate?
I think the biggest challenge was with the registration. It was a very, very frustrating process, but at least the leadership was intact and they managed to sort it out, because we registered successfully. And even though there were disruptions from bogus delegates, but that was dealt with effectively by the leadership.
What time did you sleep and what time did you get up again?
Oh, I think we slept this morning around 2 or 3. Yeah, and we got here. I think we got here on Thursday for registration, and we only managed to register yesterday around 2. Yes.
Okay. Chat to us, Refilo. What are some of the things you want to see coming out of the conference in terms of, issues that will be dealt with, which will resonate with the youth of South Africa? What are some of the things you think should be debated and spoken about here?
Nna ke batla go bona youth ya rona mo South Africa e le united. because re baetapele ba hosane nka batla go bona re le united re kgona go pusha mokgatlo wa rona ka discipline. Yes, and ntho e nka e ratang le gore re bue haholoholo batjha re gutla mo ha re dikolong re kgone go ba hantle ha re ke stand di-business re be batjha ba sa ikemelang ko bathong gore se ka re nna re itshitlhega ka batho re ba batjha ba ikemetseng rona itself. Thank you, Kaleboha.
I just spoke to Refill as well, just to ask what are some of the things you think should be debated here as well, issues that are affecting young people. She speaks about how the issues of business discussion, skills uplifting should be spoken about. What's your take on this?
I think that is a very critical question, and I think the main focus point should be the township economy. We should take that back and also equip our young people with the necessary skills to employ themselves and not necessarily look for employment in other places. I mean, we can motivate for agriculture, for artisanry and such skills. Yes, sir.
And have all the delegates registered from Walter Sisulu region?
Yeah, from Jokabi. It's Walter Sisulu sub-region, and then the region is Jokabi. And we registered successfully, but we also had challenges because there were other bogus delegates who attempted to register before us, but because the processes were clear, that was dealt with effectively.
Which province is this?
It's in the Eastern Cape.
Okay, right. Thank you very much. Of course, that's one province that has incurred challenges throughout Masal. Maybe we'll just step out of shot so you can see as they make their way to that entry point there, where they will, of course, be required to adhere to the security measures as well. And as far as we understand, it seems as though some of the delegates are indeed ready, but they're also saying there should be important items that are discussed during this conference, particularly when it comes to youth unemployment as well, amongst other issues which will address some of the challenges the youth of South Africa faces throughout the country as well.
Puli Letuji-Jones reporting to us live there from Nasrec. We seem to be edging closer to official proceedings starting at the ANC Elective Conference. We'll continue to touch base with Pule over the coming hours. Let's bring the conversation back to our studio now, where we have our analyst Rebone Tau with us, of course, who served on that first ANC Youth League National Task Team after Julius Malema's leadership was disbanded. Gosh, it does feel like a lifetime ago. Rebone, you set the tone for us just about what was happening in the ANC Youth League at the time, still sounding quite familiar to what we've seen happening over the last 8 years or so, because we have had task team after task team after task team as well. But I was struck by a quote from Tutukile Zuma a couple of days ago, and he said, and I quote, "We need to fight to be an autonomous structure that is a necessary irritation to the mother body." And I like that phrase, a necessary irritation. And I wanted to know from you whether you think there is still not a full understanding from the top brass, even though a number of them have come through the ranks of the ANC Youth League themselves, that perhaps to appeal to this younger audience that they know they so desperately need when the polls arrive next year, that there isn't an understanding of what role the ANC Youth League should be playing for them in showing young people what their role is, and that they're not just there to toe the line from a mother body, from an ANC who, as the ruling party, it has, let's face it, not covered themselves in glory in government over the last decade or so.
The sad reality is that this conference has nothing to do with the Youth League. It's about 2027. Certain ANC leaders preparing themselves for that Congress. We know that President Ramaphosa is not coming back as the president of the ANC, you know, in 2027. And historically, if you look at the ANC processes, divisions start after the NGC. And this one, it's only June, actually in July. But already by April, there were divisions which show that now people are now working towards that Congress.
Factions were aligning.
Factions were aligned. And I think I want us to go back to 2008 Congress, where Mbalula comes there to deliver his political report as the outgoing president of the Youth League, where Julius emerges. That Congress collapses in Mangaung and reconvenes in Nasrec a few months later. And the ANC goes to that Congress and tells members of the Youth League that you'll accept the outcomes of this Congress. The Youth League from 2007 was used as a lobby group when Mbalo was president of the Youth League, to campaign for the former president, Jacob Zuma, going to Polokwane. The Youth League character starts to change and becomes a lobby group. And since then, it has become a lobby group. The Youth League in 2015...
The kingmakers, I believe, was the phrase that was used a lot at the time.
Absolutely. In 2015, how Colin Maine gets elected, they want to do the same thing at this Congress, where there's no contestation, where people are just appointed as the leadership. And the ANC has not learned. And why I say that, Colin Maine was one of the most quietest president of the Youth League. He was not disbanded because he was mischievous, like Julius Malema, or being radical and so forth. He was disbanded because he was not saying anything. And 2019, the Youth League did not play that role in the 2019 elections for the ANC to deliver that youth vote that the ANC needed. Actually, the Women's League under Batabile Dlamini was more active in those elections. They helped the ANC to get the percentage that they got in those elections. So, as I'm saying, the ANC is so inward-looking that they can't even reflect on the 2019 outcomes, that the weakness of the Youth League had an impact on 2019, 2021. So obviously, if now they want to impose Colin Malachi on members of the Youth League and his slate, obviously it's going to have an impact on the ANC. So, and they're not looking at that, you know, that they need a Youth League that will be able to relate with young people, a Youth League, because when you listen to some of the interviews of these candidates, you realize that these people don't even read, you know. And you look at the generation of Lembede, the generation of Mandela, these were people that went to school, people who were well read, you know. And today, the Youth League has been reduced to just a lobby group and collecting money and deployment, you know. And that's why you look at when they came back and removed Nongeba and Joy now recently and putting members of parliament. So obviously these members of parliament need to toe the line, because we're going to conference, to elections next year. The Secretary General will be very central in this process, so they will have to deliver whatever that the Secretary General wants so that they go back as members of parliament again.
Where's the out, though? Because we saw, I mean, we were talking off air about what happened at the ANC elective conference in the Western Cape, where it seemed that this was the slate. These were the people leading the race for the leadership positions, and then the nominations came from the floor, and it was a nomination from the floor that eventually beat the expected people to be elected to conference. Does that still open the door for the voice of those who were still at the core of the ANC Youth League, the delegates, the membership, what's happening at the branches? Do you believe that process at these elective conferences is still a way for those real voices to be heard?
Unfortunately not. You know, when I spoke to some of the NTT members, even this morning, actually some are coming up with a very interesting argument. Because yesterday when Mzondile Masina announced that this Congress, they've got 2,200 branches, then I went to go and look at the ANC in December at 3,979. So that means that you have a shortfall of 1,700 branches at this conference. So then it questions the legitimacy if this Congress actually reached the 70% threshold. And some are saying they're going to raise that in plenary now with the issue of credentials, you know, because then what is the issue that how did the current task team actually come to a conclusion that they've reached threshold? Because if you are doing what you do an analysis of how many wards are there in the country. So you have around 4,000. So that means you'll need 2,800 to reach 70% of threshold. And the conference is sitting at 2,200. So some are saying that they're going to go and fight that today, this morning when they get to plenary. Because I don't know if you have seen a WhatsApp message that Sizo Pila circulated this morning on social media, where they were asking when is the meeting sitting with the audit report, you know. And they seem not to be wanting that meeting to sit, because there was an agreement after Thursday meeting that agenda in the early hours of Friday morning, I think around 6 a.m., that they will reconvene, look at the audit report. And what was interesting again, on Thursday, when I spoke to some, they were saying that there is still other branches that are being audited. Sure. Now, the question is, how did these branches go to the BGM if they are being audited? Because normally you do an audit, then you know, okay, we have reached threshold. We have got 2,000, let's say 800 branches of the 70% that is ready to go to conference and then come back and audit the BGM process. I mean, you have a province like Western Cape coming only with 11 delegates to this Congress. I'm told so, and actually, because some were saying that 23 have made it, but when I was speaking to one of the NTT members said, actually, San is coming with nothing to this Congress. So it's a very worrying factor. So
these delays that we're seeing, I mean, we're touching base with our report, and obviously there's the official line, oh, we're doing this, it's paperwork, it's delegates doing this, that and the other. Do you believe that some of these rather serious contestations is what's perhaps playing itself out behind closed doors there and is causing these delays?
Unfortunately, as I said, the last meeting that said was on Friday, on Thursday, which adjourned on Friday around 6 a.m. NTT members have been asking that can we reconvene with the final audit report, and that meeting has not said. So, and now they want to go to plenary. So it's going to play out in plenary during debate for credentials to be adopted, you know, and that opens also a room that if someone to go to court can go and contest the legitimacy of this Congress, you know, if indeed it has reached the threshold, and if, as I say, that vis-a-vis how many wards are there in the country, vis-a-vis how many branches that qualify. You can also use the ANC ANC conference in terms of 3,979 that qualified last year, because ordinarily in every branch, in every ward, there's a branch of the ANC, and there should be a branch of the Youth League.
And I suppose one could say, without being melodramatic, that how this plays out, and if those credentials are focused on, if it's allowed to play out on the plenary floor, will give us an idea whether that fiery spirit that historically was known within the ANC Youth League is still there, if those burning embers is still there. Do you believe it is?
I mean, the leaders of the Youth League who are in the task team, and for an example, one of them even told Mbalu on Thursday that you are prepared to die for these boys, you know, and you are prepared to destroy the Youth League. So there are some of these leaders of the Youth League who are clear that they are not going to allow, and I think the reason being, some of them, by the way, were there during Malema's era, so they were still young, but they were there as members of the Youth League, so they're going to revive that spirit.
Ongoing joke about what the youth, what's the cutoff rate for age in the Youth League, and if they were there during your time, during Malema's day, how old are they now? But like
35.
you said, they were, it's 35, they were quite young at the time, so they remember when, they really do remember when. Rebone Tau, you're going to stick around for the next while, so thank you so much for setting the tone for us as we try and make sense of what's playing itself out at Nasrec, with the ANC Elective Conference. Hasn't really officially gotten off to a start just yet, but our man on the scene there is Pulili Tweety Jones, and he'll be bringing us updates as well. So we'll pause the conversation there for now, but it will indeed be an ongoing one.